So I'm doing some experimenting today. This is something completely different than what you've probably seen. I'm inspired by Lars Garshaw's blog, larsblog.com. He's a beer historian that studies farmhouse ales in Norway and Scandinavia. And one of the methods of making beer that they have is to not boil the beer. It's called raw ale. And so today I'm going to try it. It's going to be a sour raw ale, so I'm going to add my house culture to it. Right now I'm just measuring out some hops. I'm going to be using my de-bittered lambic hops, and I'm going to mash hop. I'm not going to boil. I'm going to use a barrel to ferment in. Do a primary fermentation and secondary in the barrel. Got a little 6-gallon Vidai oak barrel. So we'll see how this goes. Now, these hops are pretty cheesy, so one of the concerns that I have here is how cheesy that's going to carry over into the beer. Normally the boil will boil out the isovaleric acid, which is the kind of the feedy smell. But we'll see if the fermentation takes care of it. I am going to cool overnight in the barrel, and that's kind of a concern, because I could get butyric acid issues. Since I'm not going to boil the wort, I'm not going to be pasteurizing as well. I mean, it does pasteurize at match temperatures, but there's thermotolerant bacteria that will survive. And one of those is a Clostridium, which can produce butyric acid, as far as I know. So this is going right on into my mash tun before I dough in. I'm going to put 3 more ounces of that hop in, kind of double the dosage of hops that I normally use since I'm mash hopping. Mash hopping normally gives you like 30% of the IBU, but I'm just going to double up my normal hop dosage for this, which would be 4 ounces of lambic de-bittered hops for 5 gallons of beer. Normally in raw ale, Norwegian farmhouse ales, they'll actually use juniper, but I don't have access, I don't think, to the correct species of juniper. At least I don't know yet, I still have to research it. So I'm just using the hops instead. I always heat up my mash water in on the stove. A couple of different pots, goes pretty fast. These hops smell real citrusy also. So I'm thinking they might be like Cascade or something. De-bittered hops I think I got from Hops Direct. It's a pretty simple recipe. The recipe is just, 15 pounds of 6-row, a pound of brown malt, 8 ounces of acid malt for pH, and 8 ounces of dehusked Carafa 1 for color. So it's kind of a brown ale recipe. And going to add my house culture to it, make it a sour brown ale. I've never mashed hopped. I have to say this is a little bit strange. I haven't doughed in yet, but just going to get this stirred up and lose a couple of temperature points. My mash water, I think, got a little bit hot, so I'm just going to give this a stir off some of that heat, and then dough in. That wasn't a very slick dough in. But yeah, we'll get this all stirred in, get the dough balls broken up. I'm also experimenting with 6-row. It's kind of a high protein base malt. It's supposed to be the main difference, although I've heard some things that that's not necessarily always the case. But Ed Coffey on his blog, he's been using 6-row, and I think Amos Brown and Bitter and Brown blog been using a little bit of 6-row for their sour beers. So I thought I'd give it a try, see how it goes for me. My target mash temp was 150, but I don't mind slightly higher for sour beer. Actually can be good. So 153, it's a good mash temperature. So while I'm waiting on the mash, let's talk about this barrel a little bit. It's a 6-gallon barrel, and there's a lot of problems with the 6-gallon barrel because there's a high surface area to volume ratio, which means it can extract oak really quickly. It can also expose the beer to more oxygen. You can see I've waxed about the half part of the barrel. Some of this wax might come off now that I'm emptying this, but that's alright. I had to wax both of the sides. There was a leak on one side, so I decided just to go ahead and wax with paraffin wax kind of the top half of the barrel. Now my beer is not going to sit for too long in this barrel, maybe 3 months. So we'll see how the aeration part of it goes. If it gets too acetic, since it's a sour beer, oxygen can create acetic acid, which can turn to ethyl acetate. Ethyl acetate smells, when it's in high concentrations, like nail polish. When it's in lower concentrations, it's alright, because it tastes kind of like pineapple or fruit. I'm emptying this barrel. It's been sitting with citric acid and potassium metabisulfite solution for a couple of weeks. I've done a lot of rinsing, so filling it up completely with boiling water and emptying it out. I did that 4 or 5 times before letting it sit for 2 weeks. I'm gonna rinse it again since it has the citric acid and metabisulfite inside the barrel right now. And the water coming out is a lot less brown than it was when I was first rinsing it. So the idea is I'm trying to strip a lot of the oak flavor. The oak can really over extract in these smaller barrels, and that can be bad for sour beers. I do want a little bit of oak flavor in this brown ale, but not too much. I have another brown ale, sour brown ale, I can blend it back with that's not been oaked. Okay, so at this point now I'm going to boil up some water and just rinse this out maybe 2 or 3 times. Time to vorloth. I'm going to do a lot of extra vorlothing since the 6th row had a lot of protein. Not going to boil, so I'm not going to get a protein break there. All signs are pointing to this beer being horrible. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing some of these processes. Now, you don't have to make sour beer with raw ale. Raw ale can be anything. You just don't boil. That's all what it is. Now, I also have the issue of using the mash hops, the aged isovaleric acid, feeding Parmesan cheese hops in the mash. When you boil those, it'll boil the isovaleric off because it boils at a pretty low temperature. So we'll see what the fermentation does with that, as I mentioned earlier. Also, I'm going to cool in the barrel, which could be a problem. I could get a butyric acid issue with that. So anyway, I'm not going to purge my barrel of CO2. I'm going to let it cool overnight. I'm going to fill the barrel, it's a 6-gallon barrel. I'm going to fill it with 5 gallons. Do a clean fermentation with T58, a Safale Belgian yeast. It's a low attenuating yeast, and low attenuating yeast is a good idea when you're doing sour beers. You leave some of the residual sugars there for the Brettanomyces and possibly the pedio and lacto, pediococcus and the lactobacillus. So I'm going to do primary fermentation in the barrel. When you do that, you tend to get kind of an earthy character to the beer. Also, I find that when you do primary fermentation on oak, most of the oak character kind of goes away. But it does leave you with like an earthy, some people might say rustic kind of quality to the beer. And over oaking is one issue that I'm concerned about with the beer. Another issue on top of all these other things. So hopefully that the long soaking that I've done and the multiple soakings I soaked 4 days in a row, 4 different times with boiling water before I did the 2-week soak. So hopefully a lot of the tannin content of the oak is going to be fleshed out, I'm hoping. And like I said before, I got another beer to blend back if not. Let's see if there's any other issues. DMS is not a concern for me. There's been a lot of no boil and raw ale type beers brewed that don't have DMS issues. Philosophy did a couple of blind taste tests between a 30-minute boil and a 90-minute boil. And on one of those tests, they even sent the beers into a lab, and there was no DMS in the 30-minute boil. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with all of that, but I'm not too concerned about DMS. I think that the precursor might be, I can't remember off the top of my head if the SMM precursor to DMS was activated at these mash temperatures or not. This mash is at probably 150 or so. But I think it might require a higher temperature. I'm not too sure on that. I'll put a note in. Another issue is the pasteurization temperature. So 140 is where pasteurization starts to kill most things. Now the mash is at 150. So things should be dead. There are thermotolerant bacteria that can survive, and that might create off flavors while I'm cooling overnight. I don't have a chiller. I could run this off into a boil kettle unchilled with my immersion chiller, but I'm honestly being lazy and seeing if I can avoid that. So there's a good chance that I'm going to be dumping this beer because of all those horrible things that I am doing to it, but we'll find out. So at this point I'm going to measure out 5 gallons of wort. Might not have quite 5 gallons, so I've got some sparge water heating up as well. Okay, so this next morning, and going to give it a little temperature read. So I just put in some boiling yeast nutrient, just a few ounces, and so I think that's reading a little bit warmer than it should be. So it was reading 75 earlier when I checked it before I added the boiled yeast nutrient. So I think it's actually around 75 in there. Note on the silicone bung that I found for it, and also rubber stopper. More Wine's customer service was basically useless trying to find the right fit. This rubber stopper is 6.5 is the number on it. The diameter on the bung hole is 1 inch, so I think the top is about 1.5, and then the taper down to something like 3/4 of an inch. They actually sold this one on their website, and they didn't even tell me, so thank God I could search it. So I'm going to go ahead and pitch the yeast and let this ferment out. Just going to drop the dried yeast right on in there. I know Jamil Zainasheff and Chris White say to rehydrate dried yeast, but the guys from Fermenting say just to drop it on in there, and I haven't had a problem doing that. So that is what I'm going to do. I'll let this ferment for 7 days, 7 to 10 days, and then I'm going to add my sour house culture in the form of 1 gallon of Solera beer, and then we'll see how it goes. Cheers. So it's been about 48 hours after pitching the yeast, a little bit over that, and fermentation has already started to slow down. Krausen has sunk back into the beer, just a layer of bubbles on top there, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and rack a gallon of my sour wort, or my sour beer, excuse me, my sour culture, into this, and call it good. Well, now rack just 1 gallon of my sour Solera into the barrel. And
And one reason why I wanted to rack it in early is just so that the active CO2 production and hopefully the active use will consume up the oxygen that I'm introducing. So one thing I forgot to mention earlier about the barrels, when you're getting a fresh barrel, a lot of people will say to put a wine in it, or like imperial stout or barley wine, try to get some of the oak character out of there. A lot of people don't like any oak in their sour beers. I like some oak in my sour beer, so that's going to be alright for me. But if you're getting a fresh barrel, you're going to want to put some wine in it, or imperial stout or barley wine, something like that. Something to pull out a lot of the oak and a lot of the tannin before you put in a sour beer. And for your first sour beer, a lot of people say to use like a sour red or sour brown because they go a little bit better with the oak profile. And then when your barrel goes neutral, then put a sour blonde beer in it. So we'll see how mine turns out. If it's too acidic, too vinegary, or too oaky, I'll let you guys know. And cheers, thanks for watching.